Nutrients. Nutrients in an ecosystem, these are the atoms that we find in biomolecules, or molecules in general. So for example, if we're looking at an amino acid, very basic amino acid structure, what you're seeing is the carbons, hydrogens, nitrogens, oxygen, other atoms. Those are the nutrients. Nutrients are recycled in an ecosystem. So let's talk about some specific nutrient cycles. What we call a nutrient cycle when we are seeing those nutrients go from the abiotic portions of the environment, the non-living portions of the environment, into the living portions of the environment, biotic, and then back to the abiotic portions of the environment. We call these biogeochemical cycles. So bio meaning living, the nutrients go from the living things into the geo and chemical, the non-living things, and then back again to the bio. So we have this recycling of the atoms or nutrients in the ecosystem. We're going to look at some very important ones in our ecosystem. So first example is carbon. Carbon is the backbone of carbon is the backbone of most biomolecules. You can see carbon here if we're looking at basic amino acid structure, and you don't need to know the basic amino acid structure, but I'm just showing you to show that carbon is the central component or the backbone of this compound. And we will see that in things like proteins and fats and nucleic acids. So this is the framework. Carbon is the framework of the biomolecules. Carbon dioxide, which is an abiotic component, is very important to living things. Many living things, like you and I, respire or we give off carbon dioxide as a part of cellular respiration. Carbon dioxide is taken in by autotrophs, producers, and it is utilized to go through the process of photosynthesis and create oxygen in return, plus our food. When a consumer eats a producer, it incorporates that carbon from the carbon dioxide into their body, passes it through the trophic levels, or passes it on to the base of the trophic levels, the decomposers and the detritivores, respires some of it back out, puts some of it into its body or into its cells, and it is passed through the food web, recycled by decomposers, respired out. Another place that we can find carbon is that it is taken in through water, like the oceans, for example, or a pond, and it is incorporated into the shells of organisms like mollusks, like a clam or a snail, for example. Eventually what we see is that this carbon will become limestone or will be added to coral reefs to allow other things to grow on. Carbon is also found through the production and the burning of fossil fuels. The term fossil, meaning ancient life form, makes a fuel. So oil, gas, coal are all through processes or made through processes of living things getting compacted in certain ways and going through certain chemical processes to become our fuel. There are only so many living things in the past, and so these are non-renewable resources. So here you can see the carbon biogeochemical cycle. It is rather complex, and we can see carbon dioxide being put into our atmosphere through the respiration of living things, through the burning of fossil fuels, through fires. We see a lot of fires on the west coast of the United States right now. Respiration adds, so all of these things add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. You do see one arrow taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and going into photosynthesis. The carbons that are captured through photosynthesis are made into food, which are passed through the trophic levels. Our second example of a biogeochemical cycle that's important to us is nitrogen. Nitrogen is very interesting because it has an atmospheric reservoir, meaning it is stored in the atmosphere. It makes up about 79% of the atmosphere we have, the air we breathe, yet we cannot fix or capture nitrogen into our cells by ourselves. Nitrogen is a really important component of DNA, RNA, proteins. So we do need it. We all know DNA and RNA, really, really important. We know protein, really important. So we cannot extract it from the atmosphere, meaning we cannot fix or grab it and put it into our chemical processes, but we have bacteria who undergo nitrogen fixation where they can do that. And then in a symbiotic relationship between that bacteria and a plant, it can pass on that nitrogen to a plant or the soil around the roots of a plant. Plant takes it up. It can then be passed through the trophic levels to us. Here's kind of a bigger picture of the nitrogen biogeochemical cycle. What I want you to focus on is that here we have the nitrogen fixing bacteria. They can fix or grab onto the nitrogen, absorb it. They make it available in forms that are then taken up by producers. The producers pass it on. The producers pass it on through the trophic levels into the food chains and webs. Kind of whittles down to the D&Ds. Some D&Ds decompose those nitrogens and bring it back to a little bit of what these bacteria need. So these are called denitrifying bacteria. And nitrogen in the atmosphere, big reservoir. Some nitrogen will be added to the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels, through the utilization of fertilizers. Lightning will actually bring it back into our soil, for example. Other important biogeochemical cycles. Phosphorus, another atom that is important to living things through the need in DNA and RNA and in proteins. Phosphorus most commonly comes from rocks, so it leaches into soil from rocks. Then plants will be able to absorb that and take it up. Once the autotrophs, plants, algae, cyanobacteria, either from rocks and soil or rocks and water, leaches into water and soil, then it is taken up by the autotrophs and then passed through the trophic levels or through the food web. Water, or the hydrological cycle, another very important biogeochemical cycle. Water and its cycle is mostly driven by solar energy. By heating up the water, it evaporates, then eventually coming back down. And so that we see the evaporation precipitation cycle allowing all living things to rely on water. Water is really important for our chemical reactions and to facilitate the making and breaking of chemical bonds. So remember, in terms of nutrients, that nutrients are recycled in a system and energy goes one way. Energy cannot be created over and over again. You have to replace, so energy cannot be recycled over and over again. Energy has to be replaced in the system. Energy goes one way and nutrients are recycled. So are humans messing up these biogeochemical cycles? Of course we are. And we know that through our reliance on fossil fuels, our reliance on fertilizers, pesticides. The Industrial Revolution has accelerated. We can see that through data tables that we will take a look at. Industrial Revolution has exceeded messing up these cycles. And so we're going to take a further look into this real quickly, but try not to focus too much on the negativity. So a little bit about climate change and global warming. There is a little bit of a difference between the two of them. So our atmosphere, it's like a bubble around the Earth. And natural processes will release some heat into the atmosphere, and then it would make different things happen, different weather cycles happen. Now, our reliance on fossil fuels, as well as other things like eating of meat, releases what we call greenhouse gases. So if you think about our atmosphere as a bubble or a greenhouse, it's hot in a greenhouse where plants grow. And so our reliance on meat eating as well as fossil fuels, the using of those things adds more greenhouse gases, which add more heat into our bubble. Living things are sensitive to heat. We know that from just, for example, our body temperature. So if living things in general are sensitive to heat and we keep adding heat into our bubble, do you think that adding heat can eventually make problems for living things? Well, of course. And that's what we call climate change. That global warming, when they first started studying this, maybe back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, they thought that the Earth was getting warmer. We were seeing increased temperatures around the Earth, but that was not the only issue. So early on, they said the Earth is experiencing global warming, and then we realized that shifting patterns also caused other issues with climate, like more hurricanes, more drought, more fires. And so now we encompass all of this idea of the Earth getting warmer, increases in greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, for example, methane from eating meat, for example, that these things are causing climates to change based on different environmental processes. So, the burning of fossil fuels, mostly carbon, again, we'll talk at some point a little bit about how eating more cows, for example, causes them to release burp methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. So our reliance on eating meat adds to that as well. Increases carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, but also methane, for example, another greenhouse gas, which also increase together global temperatures. And so here you can see heating of our homes, our buildings, running our electricity. That's reliant on the burning of fossil fuels, agricultural activities, these animals which give off methane. They account for about 20 to 25% of the greenhouse gases, just our reliance on eating meat. Running our vehicles, factories, power plants. Volcanoes give off a little bit. Forest fires, which we're seeing a lot more of these days. All of those are adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, thus causing the Earth to warm. Other things that are issues, we are getting rid of the photosynthesizers that can take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So deforestation is kind of like a double whammy to this. Not only are we getting rid of the autotrophs that can utilize the carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, but also we are burning them. Burning them releases extra greenhouse gases. More carbon dioxide, more of other greenhouse gases means higher temperatures on the Earth. There's a lot of data out there to support this. So what we see over time, if we look at two graphs from the 1960s to about 2015, what we see increases in carbon dioxide over time. We also see up and downs, but mostly trending upward of temperature over time. If you put the two of them on top of one another, you would see they interact. So definitely what we are seeing rises in carbon dioxide, the blue, has an effect on rising temperature. Ice deposits are melting as a result of this. These are all things that we are not, I'm sure you know all about. Shifting patterns in wildlife and their adaptations. Changing weather patterns, of course. You can see in 1941, this glacier, lots of ice here. Now, lots of water. So that's it for nutrient cycles.